For everyone with an interest in MASH, or more broadly, steatotic liver disease, SIRSA, Season 6, Episode 11, what we are calling Multi-Metabolic Week, with a special two-part roundtable helmed by Louise Campbell, and an interview Louise and I did with Dr. Emily Ann Andaya, starts now.
This week on Surfing the MASH Tsunami.
Our clinic, it's named EDOM. EDOM, E-D-O-M. E for endocrinologist, D for diabetes, O for obesity, and M for metabolism. We are multi-metabolism.
He has really become in tune to the fact that one of the biggest risk factors for cardiovascular disease is insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome, chronic inflammation, not just LDL. We as gastroenterologists and liver doctors diagnose a lot of cardiovascular disease. The existing GI practice is volume, it's 15 minutes per follow-up, and my new practice is an hour for each new patient and 30 minutes per follow-up. These are complex patients, and if you're looking at it from the metabolic standpoint, you are looking at it from the whole patient standpoint, not just the liver standpoint.
The problem is we have only two causes of death. One is the insulin resistance and the cardiovascular problems and the cancer with short telomere. That is the autodestruction button in our life. And we are programmed to the death.
Having had the light bulb moment where you can actually visualize and see the liver in a better context, what would it mean to actually just take it away?
Devastation. I'm not sure I could function without it.
This year, ASPC took a bold step and invited Dr. Christos Mantsoros. He was invited to speak, and he challenged the conventional boundaries by emphasizing the liver's equally critical role in cardiovascular disease outcomes.
For the last 5 years, MASLD stakeholders, whether manufacturers, trial sites, providers, payers, patients, or investors, have turned to surfing the MASH tsunami to keep track of drug and device development, epidemiology, public health initiatives, and practice patterns. This week, Surfing MASH shares Louise Campbell's conversation with practitioners in the US and Spain about their multi-metabolic clinics. And Roger Green joins Louise to interview the week's expert, Emily Ann Andaya, about the American Heart Association's CKM initiative and the multi-metabolic elements of her own practice. This week's sponsors for Surfing MASH include Regeneron is a leading biotechnology company that invents, develops, and commercializes life-transforming medicines for serious diseases. Founded and led by physician scientists, their unique ability to repeatedly translate science into medicine has led to numerous approved treatments and product candidates in development, most of which were homegrown in their laboratories. They are shaping the next frontier of medicine with data-powered insights from the Regeneron Genetics Center and pioneering genetic medicine platforms, enabling them to identify innovative targets and complementary approaches to potentially treat diseases like obesity and MASH.
LiverRight and the LiverRight Scanning Network. LiverRight is America's first virtual specialty clinic for liver disease, offering adults in all 50 states video appointments and helping GI practices and health systems triage and treat the swelling numbers of patients seeking MASLD and MASH testing. LiverRight offers same-week video visits and accepts insurance. For more information, contact LiverRight. That's liver then R-I-G-H-T as if one word, at www.liverright.com.
Tawazun Health, your partner in global liver health innovation. At Tawazun Health, we specialize in providing small or large-scale access to FibroScan examinations for liver health-focused early detection, clinical trials, independent research, and collaborative projects with clinicians and FibroScan providers, now in over 30 countries around the globe. As industry-leading experts, we design and deliver high-quality FibroScan services because we know that accurate, high-quality, reliable data drives better outcomes. To learn learn about Tawazun Health or our sister lifestyle app, mylife365.me, click the Tawazun Health link on the Surfing MASH homepage.
Hi, this is Roger. When this episode drops on Thursday night, I'll be in the first week of my annual 2-week August vacation. So there'll be two differences between this episode and the usual. One is, I'm not recording this on my usual high-quality sound equipment, so I might sound fuzzier or more distant. The second is that we'll have no business report this week, and we'll have one next week either, but we'll return for episode 13. Now, that said, this episode itself is a little bit different. The roundtable was scheduled to start this week, covered the issue of multi-metabolic practices. Due to a power outage in my home, I was unable to join the recording. Louise did her usual exceptional job filling in. Also, we had an expert interview with Dr. Emily Andaya, an internist who is closely involved with liver advocacy for the American Heart, American Society for Prevention of Cardiology, all kinds of other groups, and spoke from the floor at AASLD last November at a session about her belief that the American Heart Association CKM, or Cardiometabolic Initiative, should be expanded to be called CKLM and include liver as well. That interview felt like it went together with the entire roundtable, so we positioned them as one episode, and we'll be back with our usual format again next week. Hope you enjoy.
First, our multi-metabolic roundtable discussion part 1. Louise Campbell hosts this discussion, and she is joined by Dr. Lopez Alba and Irene Lopez from the EDOM Clinical in northern Spain, and Dr. Karen Jerome-Zapadka of Trajectory Health Partners of Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh. In this segment of the roundtable, the panelists discuss their motivations to create their multi-metabolic clinics, how they practice, and the diagnostics and conversational strategies they find most helpful.
Okay, so we're going to ask each of you just to introduce yourselves and tell us a bit about yourselves. Tell us where you sit within the field. And I'll start with Karen for that. And then we want to know one single thing that most of your friends and family might not know so much about, or work colleagues. And we've had Jeff Lazarus running with the Bulls in Pamplona. We've had Nigel Ferguson wearing gold lame shorts as a Take That tribute. We've had all sorts of stuff, I assure you. To Alina Allen playing music and folk music and things like that. So we get the weird and wacky out of everybody. So give us one back. But let's start with Karen. Karen, tell us a bit about yourself and where you sit within the space of multi-metabolic clinics.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here. So I am a community physician practicing in the community. Started out as a gastroenterologist from the University of Pittsburgh. I did all of my training there and started out as a gastroenterologist. And it wasn't long before I began to see, the devastations of the obesity epidemic with multiple cancers, and then turning from hepatitis C and treating that well to coming into this steatotic liver disease epidemic. It hit me to the point that I realized that I needed to have more training. So I went back about a decade ago and got my board certification in obesity medicine. Was one of the first physicians in the Pittsburgh area and the Beaver County area where I am outside of Pittsburgh to get that certification. And along the way, I was exposed to a number of other medical organizations, one of which was an organization called Low Carb USA, now the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners. I went to their first conference in 2019, really began to understand insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome. And from there, my practice dramatically changed. And I began to practice in the community, primarily with fatty liver patients, metabolic syndrome patients, pre-diabetics, diabetics. And the focus now is clearly on disease reversal, drug de-escalation. We totally changed how our obesity practice was teaching patients. We now are in a new practice where we're implementing health coaching, which is so important. We have a fitness instructor with us, a nurse practitioner, and so it is a much more comprehensive type of setting for the patients. But it is strictly around low carb and very low carb approaches to these patients that have metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance. And we're seeing phenomenal results now, and we can talk about that.
That's wonderful. And one little fact that we might not know about you.
Well, I shared this with some people, and so I myself had insulin resistance about a decade ago and understood this from my training that I was getting and totally turned it around, and I'm fine today and actually very healthy. But I had to struggle with the fact that I am a very good baker, And I am the holder of family recipes, pierogi from our Polish side and ravioli from our Italian side. And these are huge traditions and recipes passed down for generations. And we also have a wedding coming up, and we do something called the Pittsburgh Cookie Table, where we have all the friends and family baking cookies, as well as myself. I'll probably bake at least 15 kinds. So we'll have over 170 dozen cookies at the wedding, probably 50 different types of cookies. So it's a huge tradition in our area. And of course, it's a very special. We only do it every so often now. I don't bake like I used to, but I still try to hold on to all the family recipes that have been literally handed down for generations.
I do not envy your task or the gene pool from both sides of that family when we're sitting here talking about insulin resistance. And
exactly. So yes, we have come to grips with that.
Thank you for that. That was really interesting. And Dr. Lopez-Alba, thank you for joining us from Spain.
In the north of Spain, the studies in the north of Spain, Gijón, in the north of Spain.
And you are an endocrinologist by background, aren't you? And you run a multi-metabolic clinic. And I think that's why this episode is so exciting, bringing extra or additional speciality to liver disease, and we're the smaller part of the metabolic syndrome part. So tell us about the clinic, tell us about you, and you've got a colleague with you if you introduce her, and that would be useful.
Yeah, I'm Irene Lopez, and I will also be kind of the translator and the data analyst of all of the clinic, and I will be speaking in English. And well, the clinic, first of all, was formed in 2022. And it was just a project started only by him, because all of his life trajectory, ever since he graduated, he specialized in endocrinology, and he went to many congresses all around the world, United States, went all over Europe to know more and more about endocrinology, specializing in diabetes and also focusing on thyroid. We could say diabetic people and metabolism and all of these issues. And yeah, the clinic was formed 3 years ago, and it's at the very north of Spain, as he said, and everything's going quite well. There are not many clinics like the one that is here, because we count with a lot of instruments that not many clinics have. We even made a kind of a small presentation that we could show with the instruments that we have to assess patients and everything. And we have the FibroScan, which is one of the tools that we have implemented in March 2025. And so far, we've done 182 FibroScans on people and have 462 people with tirzepatide, sorry. And we are experimenting with these new medications that are coming out, which are completely a revolution for us. And he's dedicated his whole life to finding how to help people with obesity, as it is a really important disease that is sometimes overlooked and even stigmatized. And yeah, we could say that.
And that's wonderful. That's really exciting. And I think that's one of the reasons that we wanted a different field, because we speak to hepatologists and people within the MASLD and MASH field an awful lot, as you'd expect. So it's nice to bring new people into the speciality, but it's nice to see that other specialities are becoming aware of the liver beneath. So one fact about Dr. Lopez-Alba he's prepared to share about that most people wouldn't know.
Algo que quieras decir que no mucha gente sabría.
The liver is really the...
No, pero algo sobre ti.
About me.
About him, yeah.
30 years of work in the endocrinology.
What I can say about him is that when he was young, he used to dance very well. Yeah, that's something I know. I was told.
Wonderful. What I'm going to do is walk around everybody and again, just ask for one professional, one personal good thing that's happened to you guys in the last week or so. And it can be anybody. let's start with Karen again. So Dr. Lopez has time to think.
I think professionally, just being invited onto this podcast was an honor. I'm very happy to be here. Also professionally, just seeing our patients back. We had a wonderful week this week in our center. We saw a patient back that is just doing phenomenally. And I could go over the statistics of this patient later if you want to get into the details. But just seeing patients come in with severe fatty liver, pre-diabetes, hypertriglyceridemia, and just with nutrition and lifestyle alone, reverse everything, have significant weight loss and improvement of all the metabolic parameters, blood work is really, really gratifying. It's why we, continue to do this. It's just amazing the results that you can see if they follow the program that you set out for them.
Wonderful. Thank you. And your team, any good professional or personal things that have happened in the last week for you?
For us, we just absolutely 30 minutes ago, we saw a patient. When she first came, she was 15 years, 15. She was 15. And she came into the clinic with a weight of 132 kilograms. She also had a mental illness. It was very difficult for her to encourage her to lose weight. She was suffering a lot, both mentally and physically. And in 9 months, she came to 83 kilograms. We just saw her, and that was absolutely amazing. It's amazing how these medications that are coming out can change people's lives and their quality of life. And it's just so amazing to see people smile again, walk again. Like this girl had many mental issues. She kept up also with psychiatry and psychological assessment. And it's just amazing. And we believe that that's what it makes also. He's told me that that's what makes him happy, seeing people regain their independence and their happiness, because after all, obesity limits you as a person sometimes, and it's also very bad for your mental state, and it should not be stigmatized, as we said before, and that's what makes us happy mostly. Because it's a problem and it's not their fault, and we are thankful that there are many medications coming out to help them, because it's really serious and important to treat.
I think that's important. And I think, my highlight of the week, I'm going to continue on the same theme because I was doing a clinic the other day and I specialize in FibroScan and the delivery of FibroScan and direct to areas like endocrinology who don't have the liver background and don't want to utilize their staff to do that. So we bring in the field staff to do the FibroScans, talk about liver health, talk a little bit about nutrition and the wins for liver health out of the whole comorbid situation, rather than actually just focus on the liver and not anything else. So we appreciate that FibroScan is a toy, a leading non-invasive diagnostic, along with any liver stiffness measurement device that we can deploy, but it's been traditionally seen as only a hepatology assessment. And I think that's where the background is. And obviously for us now, it's diversified into a metabolic assessment of somebody's risk of diseases of cardiac, endocrine, chronic kidney, and the whole portfolio. So this week I saw a lady who, after I was discussing her FibroScan, she burst out into tears and she apologized. And I said, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "Because you didn't tell me it was just because I ate too much." And that whole thing about we assume that they have fatty liver because they eat too much. But she was a very resilient lady. She'd given up alcohol a long time ago. She'd then given up smoking. And some of the other issues that help you give up there, you tend to nibble, you tend to do different things. But she said, "I'm just emotional because I'm so happy that you didn't use that language." And I think that to me strikes home is that we need to be inclusive. I only get to see the liver. No matter what the shape is on the outside, it's the liver that tells me the story. So that was my positive for the week, because they were happy tears but relieved tears in this lady. So I totally share the background that you've just said about your wins for the week, and way to go for everybody. One of the reasons I wanted to focus very much on this particular topic and the sort of multi-metabolic clinics is that we're starting to discuss it a lot more in hepatology. And I worked at Imperial, for example, and we had a joint liver endocrine clinic. It was only once a week. It was for a small number of diabetic patients that a couple of endocrinologists would refer. It wasn't for the whole clinic. So although we're tipping in there, what we need is more of this endocrine asking hepatology, or using hepatology assessments to now look at the steatosis. So both of you run innovative clinics within your regions with psychiatrists, nutrition, and things like that. So Karen, tell us about how that came about and how you sort of broke out of the hepatology, or you brought the hepatology side in, which probably accumulate to 1/6 or 20% of the patients that you actually probably do see may have advanced liver disease or poor liver health.
Yeah, so I practiced for many years in a GI center, and we did see a lot of steatotic liver disease and other liver disease as well. But it became clear that when you really look at patients with MASLD, they have insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome. That is a systemic disease. So you really have to become comfortable with looking at every part of the patient to understand that to treat their liver, you have to treat everything about them. And so once you have a firm grasp on insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome and the risks for a multitude of every organ being involved, you begin to treat them more. I feel like I'm a much better internist now than I was during my internal medicine residency, because I understand now that by treating the insulin resistance and the metabolic syndrome, you are going to improve every organ system. And so each patient that I see, and I focus on the insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome, we ask them, is your goal to manage this or to reverse this? And so the answer is almost always, I want to reverse this. I don't want to need multiple medications. I want to reverse this before that need comes into play. And so by looking at their nutrition, their physical activity, their behavior, and all of their medical issues, you can really set them on a plan that is going to get them to reverse all of that before they need medication, or if they're even diabetic or pre-diabetic and on different medications. The whole role of drug de-escalation, saying we can improve this to the point that we can begin to remove some of these medications. And we're already doing that. So our goal is, rather than looking at these diseases as chronic and progressive, we go in right from the start and say, this can be reversed with the right lifestyle. In my practice, it's all some element of therapeutic carbohydrate reduction, whether it's low carb or very low carb, getting into the ketogenic range, really depends upon the patient and their level of insulin resistance. And we make that decision together. But we have not seen one patient with insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome that has not improved with this type of program.
That's fantastic. And I think it's really reassuring for people to listen to that.
For sure, even patients with severe steatosis, if they don't have advanced fibrosis, just with improvement in the nutrition and some weight loss, they can improve their fatty liver and reverse it. And I work out of two centers, my new center that I've opened on my own and my GI practice. And we're well over, many patients with complete reversal. We use FibroScan. In my old practice, I have a Velicur scan now that I'm using. So, being able to measure that by the scans and see complete reversal, improvements, reversal of type 2 diabetes we're seeing very clearly, certainly reversal of prediabetes, hypertriglyceridemia, all of that's very, very gratifying. But you present the patient with the option, do you want to reverse this? That should be their first option.
Fantastic. Now I'm going to ask Dr. Lopez-Alba to share your experiences of this, again within endocrinology and utilizing toys. I always use the word toys because the patients appreciate it. Little, very world expensive leading diagnostic toys like FibroScan and obviously Velicur, as Karen's described. How do you find it? How do you engage the patients? How does it work within your particular clinic?
¿Cómo reaccionan tus pacientes ante todo esto del FibroScan?
Se sirve mucho de mucha motivación. This is a issue of motivation for the patients. They see really the degree of fatty in the liver, and it is very, very, very impressive for them, because they say, I have so much fat in my liver, and this is they can see the real problem. And I am not really totally agree with the only food assessment for hepatic problems. I think that these are more complex, much more complex, with the integrate of hormone issues, and we have not ever the solution of this problem. And we have the gold la bala de plata. La bala de plata.
No se puede decir así.
Vale, nosotros tenemos the goal.
Our goal
yes.
is to what?
Yeah.
¿Para qué?
For re-education the hypothalamic problem that drive the obesity. And the obesity is la locomotora,
it's driven by the hypothalamus.
The hypothalamus, and we have diabetes, we have problems, insulin resistance, and problems in cardiac problems, ictus.
Everything.
The problem is we have only two causes of death. One is the insulin resistance and the cardiovascular problems and the cancer with short telomere. That is the autodestruction button in our life. And we are programmed to the death. But we have to get quality of life as long as possible. And with this drugs, we can obtain this important goal.
So can I ask you both, within your clinics, by the addition of liver non-invasive diagnostics, do you use FIB4, do you use the ELF test, or do you just go for FibroScan to detect steatotic liver disease? And how has that helped your practice, particularly within endocrinology? Because it's not a normal device that's used within endocrinology around the world.
We explain to the patient that the liver is the fabric of the body, and we need a hepatic health for recover our own health.
But regarding the question, we only use FibroScan. We don't use any further tests. We are mainly focused on the results that we can show them in the numbers, and we don't have any additional tests so far. We have not added anything else. We have the ultrasound, the in-body count to check the index, the body composition. We don't have further instruments yet, but regarding FibroScan and regarding the health of the liver, we only have that, the FibroScan.
And Karen, what about yourself?
In my GI practice, we've had a FibroScan machine almost a decade. We were one of the first in our community area, near the Pittsburgh area, to have this technology. And it was game-changing. When patients could see that report and understand the level of steatosis in their liver, that was one of the first things that I had ever had in my practice that motivated patients to change, when they could actually see that report. So that was a game changer for us. So now we have the Vellicur scan at my new practice, also an amazing technology. I love it because you can actually visualize the liver. You know that you are over the liver and your area of interest is over that liver tissue to obtain that fibrosis score. So I'm using both. I'm very comfortable using both. We calculate FIB4 scores on everyone. If there's any type of discrepancy, we're getting ELF scores very, very frequently. I've ordered MR elastography very frequently. And the patients understand that these are all just non-invasive methods to get at that level of fibrosis. And now, to truly understand, are they a candidate for the new, for Rezdiffra? And we do have a number of patients on that medication. So we're comfortable using these technologies. The patients understand why we're ordering them, what's at stake, do they need this medication? And then also on the flip side, when the patients see that these scans are improving, it is so empowering for the patient to see that what they are doing the task of the nutrition, the physical activity, the sleep, the stress management, and to see that all comes together and culminates in a scan in 6 months that looks so much better. That is so empowering to them. It really is motivating to keep them going.
From my perspective as a nurse consultant in that area, and particularly developing FibroScan out to everywhere rather than just in hepatology, I think it's reassuring for me to know that that's exactly the way that when it's introduced, or endocrinologists choose to have it, that it empowers their practice. If you suddenly took it away and all you had was the previous, do you think that's a better standard of care or a worse? Because some people say, I don't need it, or I don't need to know the steatotic disease. Having had the light bulb moment where you can actually visualize and see the liver in a better context, what would it mean to actually just take it away?
Devastation. I'm not sure I could function without it.
No. Dr. Alba, how would that make a difference to your practice if we suddenly took it away? This visualization of what the liver looks like, or better information on the liver health, I suppose.
Well, regarding the FibroScan, we've only had it for 5 months. And around 80% of the patients, we offered it to them and they say yes, and the other 20% reject it. Because there is also an issue in Spain regarding being able to afford to do this. It's very expensive because the salaries in Spain are quite low compared to what the real price of this is. So some patients are like, no, I don't need to know this specific thing. I only want to know what's my weight, what I can do. But they are little. They are not as many patients, and many of them accept. And not many clinics specialize in this. But we believe that it is a test that is gaining more and more importance, and that it determines a lot of things, because we consider the liver being one of the main organs for the hormones. It is very important, and patients do reject it, but it's a small quantity compared to the ones that do not reject it. And it's good that people are also caring about their hepatic health, because as Karen said, it's really encouraging when people can see that they don't have their previous liver to what we've told them to do, and how they see it with proof. And yeah, it's very encouraging.
And do you think it enhances your ability to care and provide pathways for those patients, and the non-invasiveness of it obviously is attractive to patients? Do you think it's actually really enhanced your practice in the field of obesity management? Particularly, you treat a lot of patients with Mounjaro, don't you? So that is not yet approved in fatty liver, is obviously, and MASLD and MASH, because it is going through the trials, but it is looking outstanding in what it's delivering, let's say. So the likelihood of approval we expect is going to be high. So you're using FibroScan in the normal weight loss area. And now I've said on the podcast multiple times that we're missing the data by not using FibroScan in weight loss management for semaglutide and things like that. So you're gathering that data. What are you sort of seeing in the real world of people using Mounjaro with non-invasive technologies like this?
So far, we've seen really high improvement with Mounjaro. It is changing. The ad of the GLP-1 and GIP, it's changing completely. We believe that it's a better alternative than Ozempic, but it depends on the cases also. And it is amazing, honestly. Yes, honestly, in real life, I think that it has demonstrated its improvement and people are happy with it. But also, again, one of the bad things about Mounjaro is affordability. And there is a 10 to 20% of weight decrease, weight loss due to this medication. And we can achieve that in the 90% of the patients, and it's giving really good results. However, we are still seeing the data of how it combines with FibroScan. We are still studying it because we've only had it for 5 months. So what we aim to do is, when we reach a year, it's combining both FibroScan and Mounjaro. And once it reaches a year, we will see how the liver has changed due to the treatment and the correlation with bioimpedance. And yeah, so that is it so far.
Wonderful. Karen, you've already said that you use Rezdiffra. Yes. So what are you seeing now in the FDA approved medication, and how you're able to monitor and in the real world?
Well, again, the patients that we have on it are in my old GI practice. We have a few patients in our new practice with the Velicur that may be candidates. But my first patient on Resdifra did phenomenally. I mean, her FibroScan went from severe steatosis to zero steatosis, and she went from F3 fibrosis to F1 fibrosis at her 6-month FibroScan. So that was an incredible an incredible success with the medication. So I think we'll see. I'm just getting experience with it now. I don't have very many patients on it, but we do have a few. And certainly my first one did very well. I did want to go back to make two other points. The in-body body composition analysis that you're using, I'm using it as well. That is another tool that I think is we could not function without, because when the patients come in, it's really telling us not just that they have weight loss, but what is that weight loss? Is it fat mass? Is it muscle mass? And it also gives an assessment of visceral fat. And so you can, again, use this information. If a patient, particularly, I don't use GLP-1s a lot. I mean, we are seeing drug-like effects from ketogenic diets getting just as much weight loss as medications in a lot of our patients. But I do have some that are struggling, and we do use the medications, but we don't have to use them that often. But that tool has been invaluable to show the patient if they are not doing resistance training, getting adequate protein, particularly if they're on a GLP-1, their weight loss can be a significant amount of muscle mass. And so that really is their wake-up call to really pour themselves into the resistance training, make sure they're getting adequate protein, and then you can follow that. We follow that every 3 months to make sure that their weight loss is appropriate weight loss.
And I think what you described there is what I feel the strengths of endocrinology or cardiology is, but probably more endocrinology, is you have other assessment devices. The muscle mass, we don't use those particularly in hepatology. And I think we look for the liver specific, and we're very, very focused on just one particular point. And I think what you two are describing within your clinics is this whole person-centered approach where you look at the person and you treat holistically with the other support mechanisms, psychiatry, nutrition, appropriate assessment, non-invasive diagnostics, and where the skill sets are to assist that person. Now, my understanding of where we move into multi-metabolic clinics is that can be really cost efficient for hospital and services, that we don't all have a dietitian. We don't all fight for the same pot of money. We don't be combative, which you can often see in different healthcare systems, but combining our resources releases resources. So I always see that as a potential benefit of multi-metabolic clinics and the way that they're developing with cardiology. Do you work with cardiologists within your own clinics, or do you still refer across?
Well, I have a cardiologist who sits on our hospital's metabolic task force with us, Dr. Morgan. And so we've established a really nice relationship. And he has really become in tune to the fact that one of the biggest risk factors for cardiovascular disease is insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome, chronic inflammation, not just LDL. And so he understands now to focus on all of the metabolic issues and understands that in his patients, he needs to get those reversed to improve their cardiac outcomes. So he's really been a good referrer to us. And the flip side is, as part of our center, we order CT calcium scores on everyone with metabolic syndrome. I'm not sure if Spain has access to that technology, but for us, it's very economical and very accessible to get a CT coronary calcium score. And so we get that on everyone with metabolic syndrome. And we as gastroenterologists and liver doctors diagnose a lot of cardiovascular disease. And so he gets referrals from us as well to help co-manage the patient that now has diagnosed cardiovascular disease.
Fantastic. And Dr. Lopez-Alper, do you use cardiology within your own clinic, or do you refer across?
In our clinic, not exactly in our clinic, we don't have a cardiologist. However, we have 3 cardiologists that we know, and that when we see patients that need to go there, we tell them we have these 3 cardiologists go see them and go see for their opinion also. So yeah, for an assessment, a continuous assessment with other specialists. And we also have a neurologist in the clinic that we do have. And regarding the CT scans, those we don't do in the private clinic. We don't do CT scans in the private clinic, as it is a very costly machine. And we, of course, it is not. However, in the public health system, it is very hard also to get sometimes CT scans, because the public health system sometimes is not as effective. It's in a crisis. Also, we don't have that access to CT scans as other countries may or can have. But yeah, we also work closely with cardiologists and neurologists and other specialties. And with digestive. Digestive is very important also. We refer people to a digestive clinic that we closely work with.
In part 2 of our Multi-Metabolic Roundtable, the group discusses issues around training, quality, and the growth of clinics. The Europeans, Louise and the 2 Spaniards, discussed the importance of quality control and training in use of transient elastography and patient treatment. Karen speculates on whether multi-metabolic clinics are likely to grow in the U.S. Her answer reflects the difference between general medical practices with 15-minute visits and focus on testing, and multi-metabolic therapy with 60-minute initial visits, 30-minute follow-ups, and focus on behavioral improvements.
One of the things that really excited me about your clinic was that you do a training program to train people for the quality of the care that they give to their patients. And that's quite, well, it's a 2-day, from what I can gather, quite intensive, quite constructive, and it involves all of the FibroScan and you give them a certificate of quality at the end of it. Now, as somebody who advocates that whilst FibroScan is a beautiful assessment for me, because it's the only one that I've not had the luxury of having access to VeloCure or Escopic's hepatoscope, for example. Whilst I've had a couple of hepatoscope tests myself, I quite like it, but I don't get to work with the devices. But the quality for me is of utmost importance, because the more we roll out non-invasive diagnostics into areas that are less specialized, my concern is the quality of the IQR levels rise and what we accept as an acceptable scan, and they can be totally different. So as a geek on this area and writing quality and governance standards and trying to get our IQRs less than 10% on as many patients as we can to make that quality metric, it excited me that you did this training and acknowledged that was a potential risk to the care and the quality when we use non-invasive diagnostics. And there's a lot of noise sometimes about FibroScanners to different intraoperative users, but they talk about the kilopascals and the cap. They don't talk about the IQR differential, which is actually the quality metric. So there's a lot of missing information when we talk about the noise. So how do you get physicians and people to come in and do your training and do that? And how do they find it?
Many people come to the training because, first of all, we have amazing professionals who teach very well to do the nutritional trainings, and the tools that we offer are not offered in many clinics.
Okay.
We have been selected, actually, about that, as one of the 4 clinics in Spain to teach of all Spain to teach about nutritional health and how to train about it, and for the obesity treatment.
Congratulations!
Thank you very much. So yeah, it's that, and we are going to do it in October, and that's very much it.
You might be inundated by lots of people in Spain wanting to do your training.
Yeah, maybe.
Karen, do you offer training? Do you offer support and the quality metrics, which are often seen as some of the risks and challenges of newer initiatives like
Yes,
this?
I haven't thought about that for our GI practice in a while, only because we've had the FibroScan for several years. Same two technicians doing, well, actually three. We have three that have been certified, and they've been doing it for years. With the VeloCur, that was definitely a learning curve, but they have great technical support. If we have any issue that we think the scan is not of quality, we just get them on the phone. They get onto the computer as we're doing the scan. And so they are there with us as our technician is doing the scan and can make sure that everything is right. And it's been a learning curve, but I think we have it. The scans are good quality. They do an audit on us to make sure that they're good quality every quarter. They audit us. They audit our scans. So we know that they're passing the grade as far as quality.
And I think that's exactly where we need to go in the context. For me, it's about quality.
Yes, no question.
I can only trust the results. And as any of these devices roll out, people know the scores. And they know the scores within a biopsy-proven range from clinical trials. So it's really, really important that the less we use biopsy, the more this becomes a meta-analysis review, because we don't have biopsy-proven evidence that you have alcohol or that you have autoimmune or you have MASLD or MASH. So we're basing a lot of this on non-invasive diagnostics. And we do need to look at the quality. And a lot of people can't read an elastogram, for example. And I can make, depending on where that angle of the probe is, you can really make that elastogram also, depending on the patient breathing in, the patient breathing out, the size of the liver underneath. All of these things mean that if you don't get the same point consistently, you might not. But actually, if you've only done limited supervision, it becomes difficult. So the more, for me, that we enlarge the amount of areas that we're placing or choosing to use these technologies, the better we control that we're all singing from the same hymn book. We're all being things. So it's great to know that you've got that on call for quality. What do you think are the biggest challenges going forward from what you've learned in setting up these clinics in sort of particularly the US funding and reimbursement, for example? Will we see more and a rapid rise of multi-metabolic clinics across the US, do you think?
I think one of the issues, and now I can compare and contrast my new practice with my existing GI practice. The existing GI practice is volume, it's 15 minutes per follow-up, and my new practice is an hour for each new patient and 30 minutes for follow-up. These are complex patients, and if you're looking at it from the metabolic standpoint, you are looking at it from the whole patient standpoint, not just the liver standpoint. These patients take time. I just texted my nurse practitioner a few weeks ago when I was at my regular GI practice. I said, I only had 15 minutes with this patient. There was so much to review. I couldn't do it. I can't wait to get back to the new office where we have 30 minutes to really dig into each of the issues. It is very time consuming. And so the reimbursements are much less. You're seeing fewer and fewer patients. But the flip side of that is the success that you're seeing, the outcome that you're seeing can be so much greater. And so the reimbursement pattern is just going to have to change to allow the time to treat these patients, to improve them, because then in the end, just by drug de-escalation alone, you're saving so much money. A friend of mine, Tro Kalajian out of New York, he has a practice called Toward Health. They just published an article that talked about the thousands of dollars they saved a company in just drug expenses. It was phenomenal. And so I think we really have to begin to think about how can we allow more time per patient, but recognizing the reward financially will be at the end when you have cured the patient, put things into remission, drug de-escalation. So it's really going to take a big change in thinking about that.
Do you see on that point, do you see less hospital admissions because you're getting them healthier? Do you see less loss of work time? So those are all financial rewards and quality metrics for me. If I'm a person, for my quality of life, I'm back to work, I'm having those conversations, I'm getting my life back. So it's more than just drug costs from what you're describing.
Absolutely.
Both of you were describing the entire portfolio around a patient and healthcare system improving. Is that right?
We have to say something about that, about regarding the costs. Well, first of all, he worked both in the public healthcare system and in the private healthcare system. Once he started putting sensors for the glucose meters and all of that, he started seeing how there were many people not going to the emergency rooms because they could control their glucose at home. How people didn't have low glucose or higher levels of glucose because they were controlled. And once you control things from the root, you catch things from the start, you don't see as many costs medically related. You can see how everything goes lower regarding the prices and the costs of people in the healthcare system. So once you treat the problem from the root, it is much more cost efficient. However, it is very in the private system, it is very expensive to do that. And in the public system, sometimes they don't allow doctors to put too many sensors because they are too expensive. So it's kind of difficult at the same time. How can we take care of people if we don't have the money to do so? And if people don't have the money to go to the private consult, how can we take care of them? And it's kind of a hard situation sometimes, but it is demonstrated that if you do spend a bit more money on people to take care of them consistently and with healthcare systems that are good for them, such as sensors, glucose sensors, you can see the decrease in costs. But that is something that it is difficult. And that's what he's fighting for, that he wants to demonstrate, and how investing a bit more can show such results, such incomes. It's amazing. But some people don't see it and just see short-term measures as better measures. And that's what he does not believe in. And that's also our point. And we had a question regarding the prices in the US about all of the, for example, clinic, a fiber scan, for example, how much could it be, for example, in each country?
If a patient were to self-pay for a Velacur, that would be anywhere between $120, $135 for self-pay. And most insurances are paying for it and reimbursing maybe around $90, somewhere around there on average.
I think if you look at the UK system, for example, because it's an internal market, we forget that it might be free at the point of care for all patients, but it's an internal market where everybody fights for their own piece of pie. So you get a referral cost for a GP every time they see a GP. So depending on the area of the country, you used to require a consultant hepatologist to refer you for a FibroScan. So in London, by the time you get all the appointments and get that referral, a FibroScan could work out at £750 to get to. And that's the NHS. Nobody ever sees the money and it all gets...
How much?
Things. So there's a lot of income, about £750, because you pay a GP for their appointment, you pay blood tests, you pay a consultant referral, you see that appointment, and that can be a long time. We have changed that system, but it's not particularly available where you can have a FibroScan in the community. But most primary care, rather like endocrine clinics, don't really want to see a machine in their own clinic because it might not get utilized as much as it should be. And then if you don't do enough scans, you don't have the quality. So there's which is one of the reasons we provide straight in speciality nurses and do it, and just do it. If you only want 10, you only get 10, for example. So we have a different approach, but different parts of the country will have different costs. And that's just primarily the way the internal system works. If you look at Australia, where I also get the privilege to work, this is not on Medicare. It's not in primary care. As a hepatology nurse, by the time we get you to a hepatology unit, we usually know you've either got abnormal liver function tests, and 93% of you are going to be sent back with fatty liver to be managed in primary care, or we know we've got a good idea that you are going to have a liver disease. So we've got a fairly good idea by the time you get that FibroScan. So there is no real self-pay option other than $200 or $300 to get it. And in private health in the UK, a private insurance company will way pay over the odds. They will pay £450 for a FibroScan. But that FibroScan comes with a consultant's cost. So there's another £300. So even in private care, it comes packaged. You can't, apart from through Towers and Health, you can't buy your own FibroScan and things like that. And it is regulated activity in the UK. So it comes with regulatory quality metrics and governance, which has to happen to be able to deliver FibroScan. It's an ultrasound device, and that's regulated in the UK. It's not regulated a lot of places like the US, Karen, and I don't think it's regulated in Spain. So there's lots of other areas, but we hear of stories from around the world of different metrics. Michael Patel talks a lot about not being able to get things like AST in the US. So you can't do a basic FIB4. We can't make the simple tests accessible to even get the more complex tests. But I think all three of you have described very, very well the benefits to the patient of holistic all-round care and the financial benefits to the healthcare system of that. But the complexities around commissioning, nobody knows who owns it. It's previously been owned, MASLD and MASH has always been owned by the liver side. And now there's an awareness increasing in endocrinology and cardiology, which will, for me, I think it will drive it into endocrinology more than anywhere else. And that multi-metabolic clinics that you advocate so well and have got some great results from is the real gold pinnacle on the top of the pyramid there. But I think what I tend to feel will happen is that endocrinology will then refer those who have picked up with advanced liver stiffness for further investigation within hepatology and ruling out all of the other markers that we need. And I just wondered when I was listening to Karen whether or not she feels that from her gastro side that she's better referring these patients into the obesity medicine side of the multi-metabolic clinic to get the longer appointments, to get the quality of care where that's required. Do you cross-refer to yourself by interest?
Well, that's basically what was happening at my GI practice. I got my board certification in obesity medicine a decade ago, and they allowed me to start a small obesity clinic there, Valley Gastro Center for Obesity Medicine. We took out part of medical records and put 2 exam rooms there. So it was this private little area, and we started our own obesity medicine center there. So it was wonderful. So interspersed in my day of seeing multiple GI patients, I would have true obesity medicine patients, and most of them were fatty liver patients that needed more care than what we could give in the other model. And so we allowed them more time to be seen. That was the biggest part of it. We allowed more time. We had a dietitian, we had a fitness expert, we had a body comp machine, and it was all for the obesity medicine patients. So I guess it was sort of self-referral. Mostly my partners were referring to me. These were patients that they just could not help, and they knew that they needed extra care, so they were funneled into the obesity part of it. The reason I started our new practice is because I'm going part-time for my GI practice. And once I saw what my schedule was going to look like, it wasn't going to allow me to do that anymore there. And we were having such phenomenal success with patients, I did not want to give it up. And so I'm just 2 days a week now in this new center, just doing metabolic syndrome, obesity medicine, steatotic liver disease. That's the prime focus there.
And can I ask both centres, are you seeing a rise in liver cancer? It is predicted that 1 in 6 people with diabetes are on the pathway to cirrhosis. Are those the genuine type of field that you see in clinic, or is it younger? I've spoken to a palliative care nurse not so long ago, and they are starting to see liver cancer come through into the palliative care system, and they're younger.
No question.
Previously.
No question. And when you look at metabolic syndrome, and this is one of the slides that we use when we teach patients about metabolic syndrome, you are at risk for a multitude of cancers, not just hepatic, which is certainly on the rise, but pancreatic, breast, ovarian, renal, esophageal, gastric, a multitude of cancers. And that's one of the slides that we get to motivate them that, look, if we can get this metabolic syndrome resolved, your risk of cancer will certainly go down. I've seen several patients with cancer over the years, both hepatic, definitely multiple pancreatic and uterine cancers in women. I've seen quite a bit of. And younger, we do colonoscopy several thousand a year. We diagnose younger and younger patients with colon cancer, for sure.
And Dr. Lopez-Alba, do your clinic see more and more liver cancer rising?
We have not seen a rise of liver cancer, because once we see that our patients reach a level of cirrhosis, they are directly going to digestive. We refer them to digestive because they are way more specialized, of course, in all of those aspects, and we refer them immediately. And we've seen more fatty liver cases, but any liver cancer has not been recorded yet in the clinic, because the cancers are mainly taken care of by the public healthcare system. The private system does not see cancers. You cannot afford it. In Spain, you cannot afford to see a cancer privately. We have not seen a rise because that's how it works differently, but we have seen people with cirrhosis and that can get close to that situation that we've seen way more times.
As a last question from me, I'm going to ask both of you what you would say to your endocrine colleagues about utilizing and making, or even your hepatology colleagues and cardiology, about the benefits of multi-metabolic clinics and that combining of hepatology assessments that are specialized with the specialized body assessments that you guys do. And like Karen, you were talking about the calcium scores, for example. If you had a whole range of endocrinologists, cardiologists, and hepatologists in there, how would you sell having a multi-metabolic clinic for patients?
I think the model would work, no question. Metabolic syndrome affects every cell of the body, every organ of the body. Every subspecialist, no matter what you are in, needs to be involved with treating the metabolic syndrome. You could argue that we should bring nephrologists into it, gynecologists into it. The PCOS epidemic that we're seeing is certainly driven a lot by insulin resistance. So everyone needs to understand that we are all seeing the metabolic syndrome. We should all be in this together. Instead of each of us in the silo treating our small part of it, we all have to be part of a group that's looking at the entirety of the patient, not just what's going on with them at this moment, but what are their risks for other diseases that we should be watching for. And above all, how can we reverse this as quickly as possible?
Yeah, and it does feel from what everybody said so far that it's a win-win for insurance companies to get in earlier, to find patients before they develop type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular problems and things. But Dr. Lopez-Alpa, I'm a new endocrinologist into the field and I don't think liver has much to do with it. Tell me why I'm wrong.
Well, actually, he believes that endocrinology is the protagonist of everything related, and that everything is going to be connected to this, and that eventually people will notice that everything related to hormones has more importance than people do actually give the credit. It is way more important, and actually our clinic, it's named EDOM. EDOM, EDOM. E for endocrinologist, D for diabetes, O for obesity, and M for metabolism. We are multi-metabolism, and we believe that we are going to make a change with the clinic, because we don't see the person with only, let me see your hormones in this aspect. No, it's way more than only that. Everything has to be inspected, and we believe that endocrinologists are the future, and it's just the right. It's a good specialty in our opinion.
That's so good, because I agree with you. I think endocrinology is the major part. It is the massive population of type 2 diabetes and the endocrine. And I agree with both of you. And you've sold it to me, but I was already on the page. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners are already on the page. It's unusual for us to do a podcast. Yes, Roger hasn't been able to attend due to technical. He's lost power, I believe. So he's not around. But that whole holistic approach, I think we became too siloed. We wrote the liver out of the story of our health, and it is biting us in the rear end. We now have had to write it back into the story of health rather rapidly to look at the report this week out from the Lancet about liver cancer doubling by 2050. There was a beautiful TV program or a report on last night. A bunch of 24-year-olds took part in some clinical research, and 1 in 5 24-year-olds in a particular region in Bristol have fatty liver already and are seeing the metabolic. Now they're 24. So this does not bode well for where we're going. But they were assessed by FibroScan, and it's one of those non-invasive tools or Velaclur or hepatoscope, for example, could be used in primary care. Find the liver beneath, rule it out. Don't wait to rule it in. We need to rule it out, as you guys have been saying, in this whole metabolic, every cell is affected. The conductor of our orchestra needs regular assessment. And we are now desperately across the globe trying to recognize and put it back into a story that it should never have been written out of. So getting these assessments and this, I love the idea of multi-metabolic. And I think what we need is multi-comorbidity nurse specialists and multi-metabolic nurse specialists who can talk the whole, rather than I'm just a diabetes nurse. And not just because they are nurses, but they're very valuable parts of the pathway. But we all need to be talking about the same nutritional input from a nursing perspective. We have, as nurses in allied health, we often have the longest opportunity with a person. And we tend to do the fiber scans. And I think the liver screen study that was in the late breakers at EASL this year monitored that 66% of improvement in liver health from one scan to the next. They're the ones who can probably be well managed in primary care, not thing. And just on a last note, do either of you do virtual clinics to monitor your patients between the physical assessments?
We have the capability to do virtual visits, definitely. I mean, since we're just getting up and running, it's been 6 months. We haven't done that yet, but our first patient that we saw yesterday his next follow-up will be virtual. The other thing that I don't think we've talked about is the whole role of health coaching, which I think is huge. Our 2 health coaches are certified out of the Nutrition Network out of South Africa, which is a low-carb organization. They actually published the first textbook called Ketogenic. So they have a very rigorous training program that you go through to become a certified Nutrition Network certified health coach. We have 2 of those. They are invaluable. As the physician, we're assessing and we're sort of writing the prescription for what should happen. And certainly we do motivational interviewing and get into great depth with the patients, but it's the health coach that actually teaches the patient, how is that patient going to implement this in their own life and what they're facing and the struggles and their jobs and their children and all of the stressors of their life. How are they going to make this happen? The health coaches have been just invaluable. 2 of them that have been certified were actually patients of mine that did our program and thrived, reversed their fatty liver, their insulin resistance, and wanted to get more information. So they went through the training. They've been invaluable.
Fantastic. And the Global Liver Institute, for example, do the 3A training where patients become advocates around the world.
Yes.
So they're not nutritional advocates. And I certainly did a nutritional course that took me over a year to complete from start to finish to get certified in that. And it's mind-boggling that they, even within that nutritional course, they very rarely mentioned fatty liver, but it wasn't a hot topic. It just needs to be more overtly covered. And Dr. Alba, do you have nutritional coaches and life coaches?
Yes, we have a nurse, which is a nutritional coach, which is absolutely amazing and essential for the clinic. And it is very nice because he wants to bring her here real quick to show the nurse if he could. Yeah, well, he's going. And
he's gone.
Yeah, he's gone.
We're not sending out a video, just to reassure you.
This is our nurse. She's Flor. Hi. And yeah.
Nice to meet you. And I'm, as a nurse practitioner and consultant myself, I am absolutely delighted that your lead doctor holds the nurse in to show how important she is. And I think everybody should do that, and I'll give you a certificate.
Nurses are very important, and people sometimes don't give as much importance, but they are essential. And she gives both nutritional, it helps them to motivate them. That motivation is also very important. She does it very well. And yeah, it's a really nice team. And we think that both nurses, doctors, and everything make an amazing team, and that all people should get credit for their work. Yes, that's it regarding.
And I think that's great. Wonderful. Now, I am going to call it to an end because we could discuss this and I can talk this topic forever, as our listeners will know. But the last thing that I just wanted to finish on was, how do the patients receive it? everything you've described describes patients thriving in this type of environment. That genuinely how you feel that the majority of patients respond really well to having this multimorbidity support across the spectrum. Karen, is that right?
We just had this conversation yesterday because our two patients were basically bookends. They were both young, late 30s to early 50s. They both had significant fatty liver with F1 fibrosis by Velliker, metabolic syndrome across the board. One came in having done nothing that we had talked about since his last visit. The other one came in thriving, and I mean thriving, looked like a different person. The one that was thriving and looked like a different person, he's like, it was so easy. You told me exactly what to do. I did it, and look where I am. The one that was struggling, our first thought always when someone is struggling, and we screen for this, are they having food addiction issues, sugar addiction issues, mental health issues? I don't want to make it a blanket statement, but many times that's the difference. And we use something called an UNCOPE score that tries to get out, could they have a sugar addiction, a sugar addiction? And we look back, wow, very high on that score, and they do struggle.
Wonderful. And I think on the episodes that have just been released or just coming for release and will have been by the time this one does, I raised some concerns by when we get Mounjaro and semaglutide for the real world population and MASLD, and in where will we see it like we've seen for just weight loss medication because of the amount of complexities you guys described. The level of those clinics that are currently using those for just weight loss do need to add an awful lot more, like psychiatry, nutrition, rather than just we're going to send you and do a few blood tests. So I think what you've both portrayed really, really well is the complexity of using obesity medication in a MASH environment, really, and people with advanced liver disease. And I've read some of the patient reviews of Dr. Albert's clinic, and they were glowing. And I'm sure your patients really, really respond to your environment. And I think that's what you see, isn't it? Your patients respond very, very well to the level of care that goes in and the way that you communicate with them.
Yes, actually, they make an absolute effort on trying to communicate clearly what the issue is, how they can deal with it, how there can be struggles, how anything can happen, and how they have to follow certain things to make them better. But I think that the clinic is very centered in the person, and that is transmitted to the person that goes next to the doctors. They see that they are centered in them, and that they are not only seeing like, what do you have? What are your symptoms? They are more than that, and they analyze them in a deep way. And yeah, that's why there are so many good reviews of the clinic, because it is good. The professionals are good, and yeah, we believe that.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank you all for coming on and sharing your experiences, because I think for me it's really important that endocrinologists around the world listen to this, and hepatologists really link in with their endocrinology colleagues and cardiology, and yes, kidney. We could do the whole lot. But thank you very much for coming on and joining us for such a fascinating discussion. And I love these type of discussions, as everybody will know. It's a shame Sean Schartenberg wasn't here, because he's enjoying a well-earned break, because of course he's now multi-metabolic within his department in Germany. But thank you very much for joining us.
A pleasure.
Thank you.
In today's expert segment, Dr. Emily Ann Andaya sits with Louise and Roger. Emily joined the podcast earlier this year to discuss the ways that medical organizations overlook the important role that the liver plays in the multi-metabolic panoply. At this point, she focused largely on the CKM, cardio-kidney metabolic syndrome, identified by the American Heart Association, asking why the liver was not included as an equal element of the syndrome. She starts this conversation by discussing a speech at the past weekend's meeting of the American Society of Preventive Cardiology, during which the speaker discussed the relationship of ASCVD and the liver, and, like Emily, asked why the acronym CKM isn't expanded to CKLM. From there, the panel discusses the CKM construct, what its 4 stages mean, and how they relate to the liver.
This week, our expert interview is with Emily and Andaya, who you folks met earlier in the year when she talked about how to focus a primary care practice on multi-metabolic issues. This is going to be a slightly different conversation. I think it's going to touch on a lot of the same things. Louise is with us today. Emily, and how are you today?
I am doing good. I am tired, but I made it from Boston. And my mom is upstairs in the inpatient. She just had her total knee replacement. So it's been a busy day.
Yeah, it has been. It has been. Actually, the last time I interviewed you, you were in Hawaii the day before you were flying home from vacation.
Yes.
So either you live a total jet set life, or I seem to catch you at all the right moments.
You just catch me at the right moment.
Okay. Louise, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you very much. And it's lovely to meet Emily across the screen, and apologise for her having to listen to me in the past.
Okay. Simple groundbreaker. One good thing that's happened in the past week. Emily, you just gave us at least two, but you can start wherever you want, and we'll just go from there.
I think I just want to share what happened to my last conference, and I think it is a really good conference. It's a conference of the American Society for Preventive Cardiology. We call it ASPC, and the conference is also known as CVD Prevention Congress, and we held it in Boston. So just as an overview, ASPC is an organization primarily made up of cardiologists, but it also welcomed endocrinologists, nephrologists, primary care practitioners like me, and those who are interested and devoted to advancing the cardiovascular health. At the Heart Congress, they talked heavily about standard modifiable risk factors for prevention of cardiovascular disease. That includes hypertension, hyperlipidemia, and also what's important is the non-traditional risk factors like lipoprotein little a, high sensitivity CRP, and highlighting the emerging role in personalized prevention strategies. They offer a lot of learning experiences for the attendees like me, wherein we explore established and novel treatment modalities, some not yet embedded in clinical guidelines. So when you listen to them and you talk to other people, you sound like you're really smart. But for years, they have focused on cardiovascular prevention conferences that revolved around the relationship between kidney disease, heart health, and metabolic disease, and the role of excessive adiposities in all of these diseases. But this year, ASPC took a bold step and invited Dr. Christos Mantsoros. He was invited to speak, and he challenged the conventional boundaries by emphasizing the liver's equally critical role in cardiovascular disease outcomes. His message resonated deeply with me, echoing the perspective that I've long believed that deserves greater attention. He talked about taking care of the patient as a whole. Taking care of the heart and the kidney is important, but we should not forget about the liver because we want to take care of the whole patient, and the liver is included on that whole patient. So I remembered he was also there in that conference when the author of the American Heart Association Presidential Advisory, CKM syndrome, and the author explained to us what a CKM syndrome is and the benefit of that and the role of that excessive adiposity with the kidney and the heart. But there's a picture of the liver on that pathway as well, but that wasn't mentioned. And so I questioned, and I'm shy, but during that time I stood up and I said, I don't understand why the picture of the liver is so small in that diagram. Is it because when it's diseased it's not that dangerous, or it's because it's the smallest organ in our body, which is not the case? And it's clearly there in the diagram, kidney, heart, and liver, but why is it just CKM and not CKLM? And I told the speaker that I know because I learned from Dr. Mantsoros, and I know he was there, and he told us about the importance of the liver and that ASCVD pathway, and they told us the reason why it's not included, but even if the session has ended, Dr. Mansour stood up and he said, I really would want you to consider to include the liver on the CKM. I just want you to reconsider. So now on his talk, he said, I do believe that it should be CKLM and not just CKM. So I'm not the only one. He has my back on that.
Actually, the day that I met Emily when she was speaking at ASLD and stopped to ask, why did you come to this meeting? What she was talking about was exactly this, the idea that it was CKM instead of CKLM, and how myopic that was, to use a completely unrelated organ, the eyes, how myopic it was. So what's happened next?
So they agreed with that as well. But now also, I think there's more people who's agreeing to that. And I'm hoping that American Heart Association will be open to that as well. But I mentioned about the CKM syndrome, and I think it is very important that we talk about this, because I think that this is going to be a good tool for all of us to move forward in the same direction. So American Heart Association, what they wanted to do in this CKM construct, their recommendation is to stage all of our patients in their whole lifetime. So stage 0 is when your weight is normal. Okay, you don't have any cardiovascular diseases, and I tell my patients probably when you're in high school, that's where you're at. And stage 1 is you already have an excess adiposity. So for Southeast Asian, our BMI cutoff is 23 and 25. So if you're already above those cutoff, you're already on stage 1. And if you already have prediabetes, you're already on stage 1. And then stage 2 is when you already have those other cardiometabolic risk factors like hypertriglyceridemia. Take note, triglyceride more than 135. And if you're going to think about it, which are the persons that has slightly elevated high triglycerides? They are the ones who are insulin resistant. They are the ones who have cardiometabolic diseases. So if you already have hypertension, hyperlipidemia, are already on stage 2. And stage 3 is when you already have subclinical cardiovascular disease. So when you have your heart scan and you already have a plaque, then that's subclinical cardiovascular disease and subclinical heart failure. The problem with this stage is you will not know that you're there unless you look for it. And stage 4 is when a patient already have a heart attack, stroke, and if a patient already had atrial fibrillation, and if the patient already have a heart failure or peripheral artery disease. Now, I'm sure you've heard about people who just died of a sudden heart attack at the age of 50 or 40, and they say out of nowhere. But the truth is, it's not really out of nowhere. They've been battling this for a long period of time, and it's only then that they have found out because the risk factors were missed. But now, if we are going to stage everybody, then we can have the opportunity to act on those risk factors.
Let me slow it up.
Yes.
Let me take a break. Let you catch your breath, get a sip of water. Louise, questions, comments, thoughts?
I'm loving it.
Yeah.
As you'd expect.
Part of it is we're both going. You go, girl.
Absolutely. But I do think this is, when I was reading the document, I was leaning towards that. We need to be assessing people's cardiometabolic state at stages through their lives, because the earlier we find these conditions and related conditions, the more we can do in prevention. If we find fatty liver in somebody who is in their teens, early 20s, we can talk about diet, we can talk about lifestyle, we can look at prevention, and we do have non-invasive diagnostics now that allow us to put the story together in a better way. And I think this whole thing of managing somebody, metabolic syndrome is the biggest condition globally. It is the biggest killer. It is the biggest all-cause mortality. If we did a survey in a hospital today, we're going to find a massive amount of patients in every ward with steatotic liver and multiple factors for cardiometabolic syndrome. So it really, really resonates with me that if we can get these sort of systems in place nationally, that somebody is checked out preventively or where they've already developed it by a certain stage, because we're going to have to start somewhere and they've already developed. But I think it's a great thing. And I think Russia do something similar. They assess at 18 and then they assess somebody's physical fitness at 30 is the next time point, I think. So they do so, but I don't think it's just cardiometabolic. I think it is just a general health screen. But I love it. And the more we get together as organizations, we're all saying the same thing. Early detection helps. We're all asking for the same thing. So, Emily, fill your boots. I'm in there with you.
So this CKM construct is inclusive, wherein now all patients needs to be evaluated with their kidney function. That includes urine albumin creatinine ratio. And so even if the creatinine is normal, but then they're spilling protein already, they're already classified on that CKD, which is the stage 2 and 3. But listen to this. So since I've been obsessed about this, so I tried to put in the liver. Let's just say it's going to be a CKLM, right? Where are we going to stage these patients? So of course, stage, because in the CKM, there's stage 4A and 4B. 4A is if the patient doesn't have end-stage kidney disease, and 4B if the patient has end-stage kidney disease. So if we're going to put liver in there, 4A is liver cirrhosis compensated. 4B is liver cirrhosis uncompensated. And stage 3 is if you already have F2 and F3, because that's when you really need to act to prevent it from going to liver cirrhosis. Same thing with the subclinical coronary artery disease and subclinical heart failure. Makes sense. That's when you become more aggressive. And stage 2 is when you have S3 and you already have the inflammation or steatohepatitis. Stage 1 is when you have S1 and S2. And at stage 2 is when you already have stage 3. And for me, it makes more sense because the treatment is pretty much the same. If you already have subclinical disease, that's when your GLP-1 receptor agonist and SGLT2 works really, really well. So for me, it's perfect to just put that liver staging in the CKLM construct.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yes.
Would you be able to use the current classifications that you've got, the stage 0 to 4, and then subclassify a population using either MRI, PDFF, FibroScan and CAP to see what the actual subclinical steatotic levels were within those groups, to be able to further define exactly where you are? Because your stage 0 fit healthy person, we know that 30% of them have subclinical steatotic liver.
Yes.
So if you could define what that definition was, so if you start at a base of normal people have a 30% steatotic liver prevalence, but no other symptoms, then you've just got to build. And we know that...
So they go to stage 1, so you can restage them. Now you think that, and that's the thing is, it becomes personalized. It's not just about the weight. It's about what's going on with your organ. And for me, that is more fair to the patient because that's really what's going on. And it's just like the BMI, right? BMI is normal, but then your fat percentage is high. So something like that. You're right. We can actually use that.
And I think we can also use FIB4 as a predictor, can't we? Because the higher the FIB4, the lower the estimated GFR, for example. There are areas where it does sort of match. So again, we can use other assessments that we already have in primary care that can be utilised to say if the GFR or if the FIB4 is above this, then you need to be checking kidney function as well and looking for those. So there are signals within the disease, crossovers. I'm going for the L. Add the L.
If only we can make some like votation or something. But that doesn't work. So hopefully at some point they will change their mind. It doesn't really matter. Like for me, even if it's officially that's how you stage it, when I talk to my patient, I put that in there. And another important thing is by staging this patient, this is where Life Essential 8 comes in. And I tell my patient, so if I explain it to them, it's like an analogy. So life is like a journey, right? We all get into our destination, which is a stage 5. But the problem with getting to our destination, we don't want to get there really quick. We want to not to get there as much as possible. But so I tell them that the Life's Essential 8 is like our cruise control. or speedometer. If the higher your score in your life's essential 8, and I tell them it's essential, it's not optional. So the higher your score, the smoother your drive and the slower your drive is. And the lower your score, the faster you are. And I can put in there, if you're smoking, it's like you add additional 20 miles per hour or something like that. If you don't exercise, another 10. So it's important to know. And if I have a 30-year-old patient and they already have a high blood pressure, and I tell them you're already on stage 2. Remember, you don't want to get to stage 5 really quick. So you might want to slow down. So how do you slow down? So you follow the life's essential 8. And if doing that, your blood pressure is still high, then we need to give you more. Then maybe we need to give you blood pressure medication. So you slow down a little bit. Same with the cholesterol. If they already have subclinical disease and they don't want to take their cholesterol medication, so I tell them you're already on stage 3. You don't want to get to stage 4. So how do I slow down? These are your meds. Our goal is to lower down your LDL to less than this, this, and this. You need to do all the life's essential 8. So now it makes more sense. We don't just tell them exercise and eat less. It makes more sense to me. We don't just give them a pill. Now, the communication is much better.
And is there a genetic link, like as there is in liver? Liver cirrhosis runs in families, the genetic link to be more damaged and things like that. Because our patients respond very well to knowing that protecting their livers or helping themselves actually helps their family and becoming more liver friendly, which is kidney friendly and heart friendly and things. So do you have that strong genetic seed?
So when I talk to them, it's not really part of that. But when I talk about genetics, just like LP(a), so they have that underlying, they're born like they're already running faster, right? So they need to work harder to put that brake. So that's how I explain it to them. And same thing as screening for cancer. I tell them we screen you for cancer because if you already have a cancer, it takes you out of that route and put you on a speedway or something like that. So genetics is, I talk to them about that too.
Interesting. If you add L and you go to CKLM, one of the things that clearly happens is you start to think about the liver as being two-dimensional, right? I mean, one of the things Jorn Schattenberg was talking about in an episode that will appear shortly before this one is the idea that over time, we're going to start looking for liver therapies that have two elements, one being metabolic and the other being liver-centric. You know, maybe a GLP-1 plus resmetirom to give you the most obvious example today. I didn't see anywhere in the document or what else we've talked about any attention to resmetirom at all. I guess that's because there's no L in CKM, right?
There's no resmetirom yet during that time. Remember, that was 2023.
All right.
So there's no resmetirom during that time. And on that journal too, if you're going to look there, they talked about screening, but they didn't really talk about treatment. They stopped with screening patients for fatty liver, and that's it. And they didn't put that in the diagram. They just mentioned it. You mentioned about the metabolic. So if you're going, you know what we're doing right now already. You know the studies like the ESSENCE study. So the GLP-1 receptor is the foundation of the CKM construct. We want to lose weight. We want anti-inflammatory. We want cardioprotection. We want renal protection. Well, the GLP-1 has cardioprotection. The GLP-1 has renal protection. It prevents you. It's a prevention for heart failure as well. But we know that in patients who have fatty liver, we use the GLP-1 to shrink the fat as well. And we do have information now that it's telling us that it's shrinking fibrosis as well. So you are treating the same disease on the same, if you put the L in there, you potentially can be using the same medication too, plus the resmetirom. Now with the kidney too, so with the, we talk about the SGLT2 inhibitor, which is also cardioprotection, renal protection, prevention of heart failure. It also has a role in removing the fat in the liver. So all these medicines has an effect on the liver as well if you put the L in there. But when you go to the heart failure, right, the heart failure, they have medications, and CKD, they have medications like what we call non-steroidal MRA. which is the finerenone. It's not cardioprotective. It's just specifically for prevention of, it's just for heart failure. So if you put resmetirom there, then that's going to be liver specific. So there are medicines that are kidney specific, heart specific, and liver specific, in addition to those other medications that can take care of those three organs.
I'm so busy listening that I just had a thought that went right out of my head. I guess I'm getting old. Louise, you got a question or comment?
Yeah, while you think about what you were going to say. So if we put the liver back in, it means that, or we put the liver into the conversation and we put it into the definition, it does mean to me, or it appears to mean to me, that doctors will look at the effect of the medications that use not only just on the kidney or the heart, but they will actually look at the role of what it's done to the liver within that, which is currently ignored.
Yes.
We see a lot of medications, as you've said, that defat the liver, for example, but nobody's bothered about the liver. They're just looking at liver function tests, which don't tell us really that much on that sometimes. So that is a really good way of getting a holistic assessment of what the medication is actually doing to the individual. And if the liver is cirrhotic, it's not going to do those medications much good or be as beneficial as it could be. So therefore, the assessment of the liver to know whether your medication is working appropriately or is going to is actually an important part when you go back to your stratification of 0 to 4, because you've got less likelihood of like that. So there's lots of reasons to put L back into that conversation. And when you were talking there, the other question that came to mind was PNPLA3. We know it's a genetic, it loads fat to the liver for some of the people, or predisposes them to doing that, but it is cardioprotective. What is its role in CKM? Do we know yet?
I don't think that we know a lot about that, but this is, so I did my genetic testing, and my PNPLA3 gene puts me at higher risk for hypertriglyceridemia, puts me at higher risk for insulin resistance. That is my risk for diabetes. So it actually increases your cardiovascular risk. And I don't think it is cardioprotective, but like you said, you might have heard another article, but I think there's still a lot to learn more about this genetic problems. The causality, is it causal or what? I actually have a patient that is homozygous for PNPLA3. He does have mild steatosis, but no cirrhosis. But I've had some patients who are in heterozygous and no fat, but it all goes back to, is that gene turned on or turned off? Does that patient have what we call the second hit? And I think in all genes, the most important is the second hit. What we mean by the second hit, for example, Lp(a). The patient is not smoking, so the patient is eating healthy, so the cardiovascular disease is less. But the patient that has Lp(a) and smoking and really unhealthy diet and not exercising, that is the one that's going to turn that gene. That's what we call second hit, and that's the one that's going to have all those multivascular disease, even if they have both elevated Lp(a). I want to circle back to your question about the GLP-1 in the staging. So I had this provider that made a comment, well, I don't need to measure the liver, I'll just treat it. The GLP-1 receptor agonist is going to help it anyway. But when you treat a patient with heart failure, don't you measure the ejection fraction? When you treat a patient with SGLT2 inhibitor, do you recheck the urine albumin creatinine ratio? How do you know that it is enough? So in the liver, how do you know that your GLP-1 receptor is enough? When would you know to put in the resmetirom in there? So that's why it's very important to measure and treat. So the problem really too is sometimes if we don't measure it, we don't really treat it, right? Like we don't measure it. But sometimes we measure it and we don't treat it. That's what we call therapeutic inertia. And I think that's why education is really important, when to act and not to act, and the things that we measure.
Louise, I think you found a kindred spirit.
We are twins.
From another... from the different continent.
Yes, but I do think that you know that everybody who listens to me knows that I sing from that sort of holistic type of thing. But I think it resonates with patients, because if we just keep independently telling somebody, you've now got heart disease, you've now got kidney disease, you've now got diabetes, They believe they're all separate systems, and they're not. This is a metabolic domino, and if we link them all together, then people can actually understand, rather than that feeling of don't tell me I've got something else wrong with me. What Emily describes is that conversation where you can say you're on the pathway and these are different bus stops that you might get off at. Or you might go straight past and collect. Like the Monopoly board, you want to buy some of these properties. These are things you don't want to buy. You want to leave it on the board realistically. And I think this visualization...
Please send me to jail. I don't need the $200. I don't want to buy boardwalk. Send me to jail, yeah.
Yes, but it makes conversations easier because people don't want to be told they've got another disease. If they feel it's all part of the same system and they can make a difference to that, behavioral belief therapy comes in. I've got something I can change. Whereas if you're telling them retrospectively, you've now got kidney disease, and that you don't link it to the heart or you don't link it to the liver, it's very difficult for people to just grasp that sometimes, that they're all part of that same metabolic.
I'm visualizing two things, right? First of all, if I tell you that you've got heart disease and kidney disease and liver disease and obesity and maybe hypertriglyceridemia, man, that's 5 things I got to fix.
Well, if you can fix one thing, makes a big difference, even just for one.
Well, wait, but correct. But if they're all part of the same syndrome, so that by fixing one, I'll have an effect on the others, that becomes better.
So just like what I said, that can hypertriglyceridemia, if you decrease the fat in the liver, then that prevents your liver from forming more triglyceride, right? The de novo lipogenesis. So GLP-1 can treat that. GLP-1 can treat, it's a heart medicine, it's a kidney medicine. So the patient's going to be more motivated. But can I take this opportunity to, I know we're going to say, so how are we going to move the needle? And I think American Heart Association is leading us in the right direction. So this is what I'm allowed to talk about, the CKM Health Initiative of American Heart. So let me just read it to you.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So American Heart Association launched the Cardiovascular Kidney Metabolic CKM Health Initiative in 2024. This initiative focuses on a holistic, patient-centered approach to addressing CKM syndrome, which involves heart disease, kidney disease, diabetes, and obesity. As part of this initiative, the AHA is developing a CKM recognition program for healthcare professionals and health systems dedicated to improving CKM care. In collaboration with the Cardiometabolic Center Alliance, the AHA will also develop a scalable, patient-centered certification framework to improve treatment for CKM syndrome. So we are piloting, the pilot site testing is likely to begin soon. And for those who are interested to be a part of that, watch out for that announcement at the AHA scientific session in November. So what they're doing is trying to elevate that knowledge, because if I want a certification, I want to be recognized for this. And I think people want recognition, right? And this can help elevate that care for CKM patients.
Very cool. Very cool. Very wise.
If there's somebody with a FibroScan in there, they can measure what it's doing to the liver as well.
Yeah, they're actually going to be including the liver evaluation there as well.
So if I were a physician who wanted to be part of this,
yes,
what would I do?
So you look at the website, American Heart Association, and they're going to send out invitation. For example, so what we're doing is if you're interested, you reach out to us and one of us will be reaching out and will be your contact person. So if we want a cardiometabolic hepatology to be a part of this, they can reach out to me. They can reach out to me too, or they can reach out to AHA, but we have point persons that can assist them.
Excellent. Very exciting. Okay, Louise, what do you want to ask that we haven't hit so far?
Well, I just wanted to touch it, and I wanted Emily's view. There was an article recently released called The Burden of Cardiovascular Events According to Cardiovascular Risk Profile in Adults with High Income, Middle Income and Low Income Countries, the PURE, a cohort study. And the frightening thing about that was over 40% of the first cardiac events happened in the low risk group. But when I was sort of reading that article, what struck me was there was a real notable mismatch between the traditional cardiovascular risk scores and the outcomes. not dissimilar to what we observe in patients with MASLD. There was an inverse patient risk in low and high income countries, consistent also with what we see in MASLD, where low income countries often carry a disproportionate burden when they are affected. Female age dominance, increasing event rate, closely mirrored MASLD, MASH, and steatotic liver disease trends. And it was one of those things of when you were discussing earlier about this cardiovascular and kidney and these earlier rates, and what we're seeing is the elephant in the room appear. It's not something being considered in those low risk groups. As I alluded to earlier, if we just take the average population, risk 0, who have undiagnosed steatotic liver disease, are we then able to look at these things within the sort of welcome event that you've just announced, the American Heart, and to get to these really concerning figures, that 40% of all first cardiac events happen in the low risk group, we're really missing something.
Because they're considered low-risk groups because they were not evaluated. That's one thing. They were not fully evaluated. For example, ASCVD risk calculator. That doesn't include the family history. That doesn't include, so let's just say, okay, I'm a 40-year-old patient, Southeast Asian. You calculated my ASCVD risk score and it's only 2%. But you didn't know that I have a significant family history. You didn't know that I have ASCVD. You didn't know that my BMI is 23, but as a Southeast Asian, I already have significant fatty liver disease. And then you didn't do my heart scan, and you look at my LDL, and it just says 120. My blood pressure is 130/80. I look low risk to you. But we have what we call SMRF list. That's the standard modifiable risk factor, which is the blood pressure, the lipid, and the blood sugar. Non-standard modifiable risk factors are what we call LP(a), HSCRP, which is inflammation, which is correlated with if you have fat in the liver, you are inflamed in the liver, your SCRP goes up, and your cardiovascular risk goes up. So most of the time, that's the highest risk compared to someone who's 60 years old and the blood pressure was 170/100. They are more aggressive with that patient because it's really, really high. LDL of 170, they treat them, but those ones who are considered normal, look normal like me, are actually at highest risk. And that's the purpose of this ASPC, is you need to look deeper.
So wait, is it that you're at highest risk, or is it that because your risk is going to go unidentified?
Unidentified. That's the problem there, is they go under the radar because no one looked and no one investigated further because you look fine. I look fine and until I have a massive heart attack.
Yeah. See, that's the interesting point, though, which is that we're now good enough and we have enough tools at our disposal. We don't have to use, we used so many artificial cutoffs, right? Because we didn't have the stats and we didn't have the numbers. So one of the things we find ourselves more and more falling into is the idea that when NITs take over, when NITs become the predominant diagnostic for a liver, you're not going to be talking about F1, F2, F3, F4 anymore. You're going to be talking about CAPS. You're going to be talking about KPA scores. You're going to be talking about percentage liver fat. You're going to be talking about a bunch of things that are going to be derived from tests that will present a more holistic picture of the liver than simply what you get out of one biopsy.
True.
By the same token, we don't need cutoffs right now. We need kind of what you're describing looks to me almost like an equalizer right on a sound studio. You got these 5 different bars. They go up and they go down. And if they're high enough that they're producing a sound and the sound is out of whack, treat it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And we have the tools to get there. We don't necessarily have the education to teach the tools, but we have the tools to get there.
But we're not using them.
No, we're not yet.
Not yet. Not yet.
But you keep preaching it because you're doing great.
Well, I'm trying to. There's still a lot to learn. There's really still a lot to learn. And it's really hard to, if you're going to look at it, we've been practicing medicine like this for a long, long time, siloed, and numbers. We stick to the LDL. Normal is less than 130. If you don't look for the calcium score, the heart scan, you will not know that 120 is not good for that blood vessel. But like I said, I think one of the biggest hurdle is lack of awareness, both from the patients and healthcare providers. We've operated in the silos for too long, and it's really hard to dismantle those walls. But I think we're on the right direction. We're on the first step, and I think we're going to get there.
That's encouraging. And I think if we all want to help the holistic patient, we all want to get there. And it's where you potentially then, the people aren't necessarily on the same page. It's got to be cardiology. I don't mind who leads it, as long as the patient gets the best care.
That's the truth.
And I think that's...
And I think a lot of it's going to come from the bottom up, not the top down, right? It isn't a question of what somebody writes on the top down. If I don't organically understand it, I'm not going to do the right thing.
True.
Emily, this has been fantastic. We'll have you back in 3 more months just to catch up again.
Sure.
But these have been great sessions.
And I'm so excited to be chatting with Luis. Oh, my goodness.
Well, I'm in the US next week, so that'll be fun. I'll be in your time zone.
Next time we'll get Jorn. The first time you were with us, it was just you and me, and you were so excited to be on the podcast. Now we got you up to Louise. We'll get Jorn the next time.
I want to be with Dr. Nuruddin. Okay, that's my request. If I can be with Dr. Nuruddin, I'll be really, really happy too. So I got my first goal. That's my second goal.
Okay. So that's great. And thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. It's a pleasure.
And that wraps up Season 6, Episode 11 of Surfing the MASH Tsunami. On behalf of the surfers, our guests and our sponsors, Regeneron, Liver Right, and Tawazun Health, thanks for joining us this week.
Please join us again next week for the rest of the major events of 2025 Roundtable and a conversation from the Surfing MASH Vault.
And until then, stay safe, surf on, and we'll see you next week on Surfing the MASH Tsunami podcast. Bye-bye now.